to the world of culture, gender, sexuality, tradition, business, and so much more. Hi, I'm Regina Gesmene.
And I'm Dr. Sam Dubé. Together, we're going to take you on an extraordinary journey with engaging people from around the world, starting from right here in Ottawa, the capital of Canada.
In my line of work, a lot of people come to me for the dating etiquette advice, and there are a lot of faux pas, and I see there's a lot of misinformation, miscommunication between men and women. And as you know, women are very emotional, and men are not as emotional. So sometimes messages get mixed, and they don't seem to understand each other sometimes, and I get a lot of interesting stories because of that, especially when it comes to first time dating. What do you think about that?
Well, honestly, so I work with people of all genders, so men and women as well as genderqueer folks, and I find actually that reducing people to kind of like gender stereotypes tends to get me further away from my goals of really understanding people. Often I have people of all genders who are very emotional, not emotional at all, and I tend to not see as many like stereotypical dynamics, especially between men and women. So I think, if anything, people who kind of assume that men are going to be this way, women are going to be this way, especially when there's dealing with kind of like typically heterosexual dynamics, they tend to fall into the trap of assuming those things, and then they from the communication that they should be having, and these expectations of how a woman should be, how a man should be. And often, I mean, I work with clients who are genderqueer or gender fluid, so these things don't necessarily apply, but it really is, it just causes problems where often problems don't need to be. Whereas if we approach these things as human, we approach these things as ourselves and not so much our expectations about someone's gender identity and how that will, interact with their behavior, we're able to kind of just let a situation be. And situations are complicated enough. Communication is complicated enough. Getting to know someone is complicated enough without adding those layers.
Well, exactly. Communication is extremely important between the couples, and talking about the couples, so we're talking about men and women. For instance, the other day I had an interesting conversation with one of my clients, a lady who said that her date skipped out on her after dinner. What a faux pas. And he skipped out on her through the window, through the bathroom window, so he wouldn't have to pay or see her. So she was devastated. What can you tell us about that? What's your intake on that?
Well, honestly, I have never encountered that situation in my own life or for any of my clients. As a matchmaker, I vet people ahead of time, so for that, ideally, I tell everybody that there are certain behaviors expected, and you don't have to love everybody. You don't need to marry somebody I match you with, but you do need to treat them with respect. You need to, be polite. You have to be, conscientious, as hopefully all humans are. So I've never had to deal with that myself in any way. I mean, that's just bad, and you hope that kind of like reverse engineering, working backwards, you can look for maybe some, maybe some warning signs, maybe an area where if you had vetted them differently, if you had maybe, started with a call, started with, a video chat before moving to an in-person date, maybe you would have caught those things. But the truth is, there are times where people just pull the wool over our eyes, and we can't really know that it's going to happen. I mean, all I can really say about this is don't do it. Don't.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that is just so mean, and it's just not called for. But, it happens. I would say just it happens. Move on. Don't take it very close to heart and go on another date with somebody new.
Yeah, you can't, unfortunately, like if this happens to you 6 times in a row, then it's a pattern. But if it's a one-off, terrible things happen. People are weird. Sometimes we misjudge people. Sometimes people make themselves be one way.
Yes.
And
yes.
They're very
yeah.
example, but even in smaller examples, if you go on a date with somebody and they don't treat you the way you like, or they don't, respect you the way you like, seeing it happening over and over again, that's definitely something to kind of look at the types of people you're attracted to, look at maybe the types of dynamics you get into. But if it's a one-off, the best thing you can do is say, okay, I don't want this to happen again.
Yes.
To the best of your ability, take a pause, take a breath, and then move on, because that is a rare situation.
Exactly. Moving on from that, another topic that was brought to my attention was also very interesting. Who pays for what? Will when a man is asking a lady on a first date, would he be paying for the date, or expected she would be paying for the date? What in my personal traditional way, I would say if a man asks a woman on a date, he's supposed to pay for the date after dinner. And so that's a traditional way. But right now, with millennials and Generation Xers, it depends. I think it would depend, but this is what I think. What do you think of that? What's your point on that?
I mean, again, because I work with people of all genders, as well as I work with, like LGBTQ folks, so people women are dating women, men are dating men, as well as like genderqueer, non-binary folks. These things really don't fit in a lot of the time. And my client base is anywhere from people in their 20s to I have clients in their 80s. So generally speaking, there are some expectations that are a little more generational.
Right. Okay.
I try to speak to everybody fairly clearly. And what I try to say is that, and this is true of paying for dinner, but it's true of a lot of other expectations of things that are maybe coded chivalrous or coded more focused on like traditional dynamics. I like to say it's okay to want those things, but especially early in a relationship. So the first couple dates, the other person may not be on the same page, and that doesn't mean that they're disrespectful. So when I match people, obviously no one's asking anybody out on the date. Both of them have said, I want a date, and I set them up. So I just say, be prepared to pay for your half.
Okay, that's interesting. Yes.
And buy the most expensive thing on the menu. Another thing I encourage people is maybe don't do a big expensive dinner for a first date. Maybe, wander around. Maybe get, tea or coffee. Maybe, do something where it's not the stereotypical sit down, essentially interview the person, and then at the end, there's kind of that struggle of what does it mean if someone doesn't pay for me? When the stakes are lower, when the cost is lower, it enables everybody to get a fair shot of enjoying the date. It doesn't let anybody feel like, oh, if they don't pay for dinner, I can't afford it. Yes. And I mean, a nice gesture is to pick up both coffees, but it doesn't need to be gendered. And if the date's going well, maybe you go to a coffee place and then later you stop at a bakery and grab a croissant. Maybe they grab the coffees, maybe you grab the croissant. Or maybe you say, we'll go Dutch on this date. Maybe you'll say, next time I'll get you if you're enjoying the date and you want to go on a second date. There's a lot of things where people talk about, I will only let somebody pay for me if I would be willing to have sex with them on the first date, or if I'd be willing to go on a second date. And those things, I just feel like all that calculation is very personal, and it doesn't account the fact that there's another person across from you who may not be thinking the same thing. And in general, that kind of bartering of, somebody paying for me means they like me, means I have to be willing to do certain things with them or go out with them again, and otherwise they'll be mad at me. They'll feel like, they spent their money for nothing. that is such a toxic thing to include in dating, even if, whether or not the date is going well, just in general dating culture, to have that mentality is so unromantic and so, like, at best it's unromantic, at worst it's actually kind of scary, and you can feel obligated to do things that you wouldn't actually want to do. So I really just encourage people to not put pressure on those dynamics, to not assume that, you know, who calls first, or how they email you, if they text you instead, if they pay for dinner, if they suggest a coffee instead of dinner.
Yes.
Do not read into that too much.
Okay.
It can be a part of, you know, when you get to know a person thoroughly by the end of the day, it can be looked at it.
Yes.
But it's not the full piece of information. It's not, everything is not riding on whether or not they pay, or whether or not they text you, or
Okay. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And the same thing with me. I agree with you. On a first date, they should have more like a coffee date, tea date, just to make sure that they're getting along very well. Because there are circumstances that they might not like each other, they might not like their personality and or appearance, and so they wouldn't want to stick around for an hour or 2 hours, and that's the usual dinner time. So for a half an hour, I'm sure they can tolerate each other and nicely part their ways. And if they want, it's still nice for a man to pick up the bill, but in case he doesn't, well, they should be ready to pay Dutch, you know, go halfway.
And the truth is, like, even, you know, if we're talking about a hetero dynamic and we're talking about a man and a woman,
That's right.
look into the reasons why somebody may choose to pay or not. It's not necessarily, I don't like this person or I don't respect this person. It might be, I see this person is, you know, a capable person. I see this person as a feminist. I don't want, I've had so many people say, well, I don't want to offend somebody by assuming that I'm going to pay the bill. And that is completely valid. Another thing is, like, there, especially, not to say that we're at exact gender parity in terms of payment and in terms of work, but as we get closer to that, as we're no longer in the 1950s where it's, you know, less likely for a woman to be working and making her own money, we are at a place now where I have lots of clients and I have had lots of people in my own life where, even in a hetero context, maybe a woman makes significantly more money than the man. Like, if it's a doctor going out with an artist, like a not so traditionally financially successful artist, I would feel like it would be very reasonable for whoever the person who makes more money is to maybe pick up the tab.
Yes.
I think in general, first dates, it's nice if you can start out small, and if you're having a great time, it doesn't mean you can't have, you know, an 8-hour long date. But start at a cafe, go for a little wander. Then if you're having a great time, say, hey, I know this place nearby, do you want to grab dinner? Start small, and then that also gives people opportunities to pay for one part but not all of it. And yeah, I think the idea of sitting down for like a fancy white tablecloth dinner for every first date sounds very expensive. And it sounds like there would be times where that would be great, and then there would be times where, as you said, after the first, 5-10 minutes, you think, oh, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore, but
Yes.
I haven't had the salads yet, so I'm locked in for another 2 hours.
Cross-cultural couples, if they're dating, so the culture gets in the way, and I think he or she should decide where they're gonna go, and the expectation of who's going to pay as well, because in different cultures it may be different. Like, for example, in Russian culture, a man should always pay, but then a lady should explain to who she's going to be dating that in her culture a man should be paying, so he should be aware that after lunch or dinner he should be paying. How does it? What do you think of that? Because I find in the cross culture there's a higher expectation.
So I think this is less about what happens on the date and more about what should be happening before the date, which is there are a lot of cultural expectations that vary widely, and I think it's a good idea to be aware of the fact, if you are going on a cross-cultural date, that not only is that person maybe not going to know what to expect, but also your way isn't necessarily right. So if I just said, in my culture, people pay for everything. I don't pay for anything, you pay for everything. That doesn't mean the person has to say yes. That's
true.
In a lot of cultures, and even I think in Russian culture, it could be considered rude to say, you're going to pay. You know?
Yes. There have been episodes, yes.
Understandings are that, in Russian culture, people pay. It's good to know that you personally like that, but that more in Russian culture, as well as in most other cultures, it would be more rude for you to say, hey buddy, you're going to pay for my dinner, than it would be for somebody not pay for your dinner. So this is a situation where maybe if it's really, really important to you that somebody pays on the first date, that you look for people who not necessarily are from the same background, but who are similarly, into traditional values when it comes to dates.
Exactly.
Instead of saying, like, this is what I want and you're going to do it, might be better to look for the people who will naturally. Mm-hmm. And also,
okay,
if somebody doesn't pay, that it's rude. Because, the thing about culture, the thing about being in a place where there are many cultures is that we may experience different things, but those things, just because they're different than what we're used to, doesn't mean that they're necessarily bad.
Yes. And as I find these similarities with Asian cultures and East Indian cultures, because there's a lot of expectations, and if they're dating a Caucasian, and there is a little bit, I guess, the culture barrier. So when they're going on a first date, they don't seem to go for coffee dates. They go straight into the dinner date, and then they start talking, and then there's certain expectations. So what do you think about that? I think it goes back to talk about it beforehand, just to understand the traditional values of that person they're going out with, so there won't be any surprises afterwards and any disappointments as well.
I think that it's really useful for us as people who are talking about dating, who are, able to kind of set the tone, to not make assumptions based on culture. So to say anybody who is from, like this entire part of the world will want this, that's not true. And especially in Canada, where there are so many people with so many different experiences, I would say, instead of saying, oh, this person is of this heritage, therefore they will want this, it's much better to say, somebody who has more traditional values around dating. It can be like, there are so many people of so many backgrounds who are traditional, and there are so many people of so many backgrounds who are less traditional. So I find it's reductive to stereotype in this case. It's really, even if your experience may be like that, the people you've worked with, that tends to track, it's still not universal. I think especially in a show where you're able to talk about dating, you don't want to give people the message that, like, oh, if a person looks like this or comes from this place, they're going to want this. That's not true. I think as much as possible to really rely on each person as an individual and to lead based on, fundamental levels of respect, but not to add additional assumptions.
things. So now thinking back to you may be currently in an intercultural, interracial relationship, or in the past, can you talk to this public perception that you've experienced? I know it depends on where you are in the world, but can you tell us about your personal experience as an interracial couple or intercultural couple?
I would say it was a mixture of positive and negative. So as far as my family and my friends and people that really know me, anybody that really knows me, they know that I am very open when it comes to different races, because I was just never raised to look at a certain race and say that you're off, you don't look or you don't have the same skin color as me. So I wasn't raised like that. So friends and family were very open and they were okay with. I would definitely have to say it depends on the location that you're at, and definitely depends on where you're at that particular time. I've had some positive outlooks, meaning that I had people that embraced it, they liked it, they had no problem with it, but also I did have some uncomfortable stares, and it looked unnormal to be with somebody that didn't necessarily look like you. So it would have to be a mixer.
Good question. So is there anything that you would like to talk about to give you a platform here regarding intercultural, interracial relationships? Is there anything that's been itching to get out? You want to talk about it?
I would say that when it comes to connecting with color, is not an issue. It shouldn't be an issue, because at the end of the day, you should be really connecting with somebody in a personal level, in an intimate, in an emotional level, in a spiritual level. So as long as those things hit and you guys are willing to work at the relationship, I think that skin color should, not be the issue. That's how I look at it. So anybody that is in a interracial relationship or in a relationship that's outside of your race, embrace it. And if you approve of it, your partner approves of it, you just have to take it day by day.
Now, I was going to put her on the spot here.
Okay.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Ask your question too.
Okay, you go ahead. You go ahead first.
Okay, thank you so much. You're such a gentleman.
I am.
So the expectation of your someone to get married to and raise children. Is there any expectation of your parents? I mean, or it's up to you to choose your partner, whatever they're interracial or intercultural. It's up to you. They left it up to you, and there's absolutely no problem, and it doesn't matter to them.
I'm sorry. Can you answer? Can you give me that question one more time?
Yes, we go.
Okay. So my question is, do your parents have an expectation of what kind of husband they want you to have and raise children in respect of interracial or intercultural sense of thing?
No. My never had a guideline or a restriction when it comes to if I did end up getting married or if I did have kids. Currently, I don't have kids. I'm not married. Never been married. So as far as the restrictions, I think my parents, as long as that person makes me happy and we have a strong foundation and we know what we're doing and we're on the same page. And of course, they respect my parents. Because, so you have to you have to, with my mom's a feisty one. She's strong. She is independent. She is amazing, my mom. So if you can actually, if my husband, if I ever get married, if my husband is able to get my mom to like them, that's a big,
that's important.
back. He's like, he's easy. My mom, my dad's easy. It's my mom that you have to impress. But my mom has never raised us to have any restrictions, and she didn't have any restrictions as well. So.
But no one is good enough for her little girl, right?
My mom?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, my mom is just, she's from the Caribbean, and she was raised, and she was raised a certain way, but my mom is so strong, but at the same time, she's such a sweetie pie. So for if I do get married and my fiance, is, my husband or my fiance approves, or my mom approves of him, he must be really special, because my mom she's a
tough woman to please.
Your mom is your role model.
I'm sorry?
I said your mom is your role model by the sounds of it.
My mom, I definitely take a lot of my mom, and it's a lot of things that I respect and I admire about my mom. So the fact that if my mom likes somebody, I definitely would, be something special to me, because I know that my mom, she's to approve on. She's tough, so.
It's the same with my mom, and she's Chinese. Exactly the same thing. So I'm going to put you on the spot, and I'm going to ask you for examples of specific cultures whose men you've dated, and what struck you about those particular cultures, if I may be so bold. And I know it's difficult to separate a culture from someone's personality, because you don't know what shapes what, but I'm going to put you on the spot, and I'm going to ask you for some examples. So,
wow.
Yes.
So I would have the one that I've talked to, dated, interacted with.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have dated a Mexican.
And?
Man, have to say, I'm sorry?
Yeah.
And you elaborate, please.
And I would say Mexican men are definitely very passionate. They're very sweet. They are one of the most hardworking people that I've ever seen. He was so hardworking. The downfalls of dating him was that he was a little possessive and very stuck on outlook on life, meaning that he preferred a woman to stay home versus being the breadwinner. So he believed more of the man should have more money and the woman should have money, but not as much.
And how did that agree with you or not agree with you? How did that strike you?
Oh, I had a problem with that.
Okay.
Oh, I had a problem with that. That was one of the biggest issues that we had throughout our relationship, because he understand why I was working as well. And for me, I was raised in a household where my mom was a single parent until I was 16. She met my stepfather, but at a very young age, mom always instilled that in me, that regardless if your partner has some money, you should always have something just to fall on, and for you guys to at least grow and build on that. So that was something that was just installed at me at such a young age, that to just have my partner have all of me and problem with me. So that was one of our biggest things. So it definitely made me feel uncomfortable.
Okay.
I would have
Another example. Another culture, another individual.
Anybody else who's dated?
So I definitely talked to an Indian man. So I would have to say Indian men, for me, for my perception, they were very sweet, very understanding, I would have to say that the cons of it was they were very traditional as well. They prefer a woman to stay home, not as often, but prefer a woman to stay home, where, you know, he preferred a man to have more of the money. That made me uncomfortable as well. I dated a white man. I dated a Polish guy. He was Polish. And I would have to say that white men that I've dated, very sweet, very understanding, very funny, very sincere, very nice, very respectful. Some of the issues I had as far as dating a white man, I would have to say I didn't really have a lot of issues, but our different perceptions of how we look at the world would definitely be one of our issues. I think that me talking to we just had different outlooks, and for me, I went through so much situations in my life that he didn't necessarily understand, because in his lens, it just. And I think trying to talk to him in a way where trying to let him know this is issues that we are going to face because you are with me. I think that was some of the issues that he didn't understand because he never went through it.
Right. No, I understand. Now, the $64 million question. What? No Asian men?
No.
Maybe
your field research is inadequate.
Oh, maybe it's next on your list.
Yes, not even a mixed Asian man like me? Seriously? You gotta go back.
No.
Oh?
I never had an Asian. I definitely had them hit on me. Yeah, but never as far as really having an intimate conversation, as far as intimately talking. I've had conversations. I've had occasionally, oh yeah, you're a cute girl, like, oh, thank you, but never were we actually engaged in talking and texting and really getting to know each other. But I love the food.
You love the food?
Yeah, I love the
food. Authentic food, or just kind of like Chinese American food or Korean American?
I've had both, because not in New Jersey, but in New York, they actually really have some real authentic Japanese, Asian, Chinese food in like Chinatown. But in Jersey, they do have some authentic Chinese food, but most of it is just Americanized, like just simple Chinese food that is just Americanized.
I understand. You're forgiven for now. For now. Not Chinese. There's only Chinese food. I don't think about the other Asian countries. But no, that's good. That's good to know. So, was there anything in particular that prevented you from having a more intimate conversation with an East Asian man, or was it just the circumstances weren't right?
Yeah, I definitely think that the situation just wasn't right. Never got to the point that we just had an intimate, conversation. I don't know if maybe it just wasn't the right moment, but just never happened.
We're going to have to wrap this up soon, Gesmene, but I wanted to ask you, do you have any advice for a woman in your position who's open to dating interracially, interculturally? Is there any lessons that you've learned that you would like to hand over and share to others?
I would definitely say, any advice that I would have to say is be understanding with each other. Be willing to embrace each other's perceptions and different views of the life. And regardless of what people say or what people don't say, as long as you guys really do care about each other and love each other and build a relationship every day, the color or the background shouldn't matter. So embrace it, enjoy it, get to know each other, and regardless, it's really your soul that you're connecting with, regardless of the color.
I like that. It's your soul you're connecting with.
Very beautiful.
Anything else to add, Gina?
Oh, it's very beautiful. Well, thank you so much. It was a great pleasure to talk to you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Pleasure to speak with you. I'm Sam. This is Regina. Thanks again, Gesmene. We will be in touch. Don't go away, but we're going to say we're signing off here. And I hope that you're safe in the U.S. right now. Lots going on there. And I hope you and your family are safe. And
Thank you.
no problem.
No,
And
thank you.
very much for your participation and discussion. We have a little bit of internet issue here, but hey, this is the day and age of COVID, right? So thank you so much. Stay with us, and we'll bid you adieu. Merci. Ça nous a fait vraiment plaisir de faire ta connaissance. Can you give us a little French? Because we're Canadian here, right?
Yes.
So.
Yeah, bonjour, et toi? Yeah.
Non, tu vas dire au revoir. Hi, Dr. Sam Dubé here, and I'm joined by Soheyla, direct from Queens, New York. Soheyla, thank you very much for coming together with us today to talk about interracial and intercultural dating. So you mentioned to me that your mother is half Turkish and is of the Muslim faith.
Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit for us?
Yeah, I mean, her mom is Muslim and her dad is Christian. So she grew up kind of practicing both religions. I don't want to say she was an avid, religious person, but there were certain things that she did. So, for instance, she didn't eat pork. She fasted when she had to fast. She celebrated Christmas, when the time was. So that's how we grew up.
Wow, so it was quite integrated then.
Yep, for sure.
How else did it affect you in terms of your dating life?
Personally, it never affected me, but I was dating someone in college whose mother was very opinionated. She knew how I dressed. I had no problems wearing shorts or showing skin. I wasn't covered up. I believe in God, but I wouldn't necessarily say that I practiced my faith as much as I should have, right? But she knew that. I was very much modernized. And when I told her that my mom had Muslim descent in her family, she was very opinionated about that. So that was the first time that I felt, some sort of negativity, some sort of animosity. Other than that, I've never experienced it before.
In what way was she opinionated? Can you be more specific?
Yeah, she would have side conversations with my ex talking about, be careful, they might do something, you have to act a certain way, say things a certain way, and she was almost scared in a sense, which I don't understand why, but yeah, that was her opinion. So
you don't assign any particular religion to your own identity, is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Can you tell us more about your experiences with intercultural, interracial, or interreligious dating?
So my dad is Armenian, and my mom is Turkish.
Oh,
Yes.
right. So can you fill in our viewers a little bit about the potential friction there?
A lot of friction, actually. There was a lot of family animosity, a lot of family tension for sure, right? I think that growing up, it definitely instilled in me this idea of not really holding on to relationships too much. Like, if it didn't work out, it didn't work out, and I would be able to move on just because that's how my father was. Especially within his own relationships and his family, and then the way that he treated my mother's side. So I kind of grew up with that type of mindset. Definitely not the best mindset. It's not healthy for sure, but it was hard. It was hard keeping people in my life.
Very interesting.
With maybe one of your relationships and how you ended it, or how that cutting off mindset manifested.
I was friends with someone in high school. We were best friends. We actually knew each other as children, lost touch, and then reconnected back in high school. Very, very, very close. One day, something happened, really minor arguments, and I had no problem cutting her off. Absolutely no problem. And I didn't even look back. I didn't think twice. It was something that could have easily been communicated and fixed. But that's just something that wasn't, enabled in me. So.
And you attribute that to what your father taught you
Yes.
regarding relationships. Okay. And as you mentioned, you're trying to modify that now. You're trying to move beyond that now. Okay, what are your parents' expectations for you with regards to finding a partner?
Honestly, I don't know. They haven't communicated that with me. I think because over the years I've really grown this sense of independency and not having to fall into, what they've wanted to instill in me, quote unquote. So they know that regardless of whatever they say, it's not going to influence my behavior.
So they pretty much left you to your own devices then?
Yes.
Okay, so that's interesting because, Turkish families, Armenian families can tend to be quite traditional. I actually have Turkish friends, and I have an Armenian friend in Montreal too, and I've seen that. It's much more traditional. But I guess because of your interesting background, your bicultural background, there's a medium there that you needed, a line you needed to walk. Right. And so that must have been very challenging for you. Very challenging for you.
I definitely heard a lot of opinions from family members, not necessarily my own parents, just because of the history there. They obviously went against it, right? But from family members, I have Muslim family members who obviously want me to date a Muslim. They want me to date someone of the religion, of the culture, just because it's easy to pass down to children. And then there's people who just look at you from up front, regardless of what your religion and culture is. If you have tattoos and piercings, that's a big no-go because it's going against culture. And so, yeah, a lot of implementation.
Did you go against that culture? Forgive me if you mentioned that you dated a Muslim individual. Did you date a Muslim man, you said? I'm sorry,
He's Christian.
You dated a Christian man, okay. And so were you going against tradition then? And how did that work out or not work out? Sorry, did you hear my last question?
Yes, I answered it. I don't think you heard me, but I said that.
I'm sorry.
I think, what did I say? I said I did date a Christian. He had the look of someone who you did not want to bring home. Had I brought him home to my grandmother, she probably would have had a heart attack or disowned me, so... Yeah.
And so, in other words, he appeared in ways that your family didn't approve of. Was he? And you mentioned that they didn't approve of tattoos. They didn't approve of other aspects. So, what did he look like? If you can give us an image and what your family found, what your family disapproved of.
Think of a bodybuilder. Muscular, tattoos, piercings, typical. Yeah.
Okay, and they didn't approve of the whole package deal then.
Not at all.
Hey, some of the greatest lifters in the world come from Turkey, I gotta tell you. Hello Mutlu and Naim Suleimanalu and very much guys.
Absolutely, but because they didn't go based off of cultural norm and whatever was considered to be ethical, especially to the older generation,
Right.
it's kind of like, nope, that's a no-go.
So can you take us through that relationship and what happened?
That relationship, let's see, met in college, went into business together to open a gym for kids with disabilities, did workouts.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Great idea though.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm continuing to work on it, but by myself now, years and years later. So it did not work out. Basically, you know, the stereotypical, when someone looks a certain way, you think that they have a certain mentality as well. That's the mentality he ended up having.
Hey, look at me, okay? I know.
I'm talking to the perfect example, but yeah, it just didn't work out, you know. Ended in it's a very long story. I could go through it, but very, very comical.
What aspect did culture and the differences therein have on your relationship? Any at all? None at all? Intertwined?
Honestly, we were really excited about the differences just because it was a great conversation to have. Each and every single day we could learn from one another. But because his mother was so taken aback by the small Muslim piece that I had in my family, it really created a drift in our relationship. You know, I started to see a different side of her, a lot of opinions, had a lot of animosity towards her, someone who I felt very close with, and I just could not continue the relationship. There was no support there. And there was a lot of hatred for my parents. So I couldn't be with someone like that.
So your bodybuilding, tattooed, Caucasian boyfriend's mother was prejudiced against the 1/4 Muslim in your background?
Yes, he was Brazilian, not Caucasian.
Brazilian. Okay, excuse me. Well, I mean, there are Caucasians in Brazil, but they don't look at race the way we do here. There's a lot of mixing, and you know, it's more of a class distinction in Brazil rather than a racial distinction. I think you probably are more aware of that than I am. But that's unfortunate. So can you tell us how that friction manifested, if you're comfortable talking about it?
Honestly, I don't remember the conversation, but one day he had mentioned that I was fasting because, you know, sometimes I like to practice that whenever the time comes up. And all of a sudden, her mind just went in a million different directions. Why is she fasting? What would she be doing that for? Is she covering up during this time? Are you guys intimate during this time? Have you met her family? Are they acting a certain way? Be careful not to say something. You never know what can happen. And she made it as if we were threatening, you know, as if he were to say something wrong, his life would be over. That's how she portrayed it to be.
Was she Brazilian Catholic?
Yeah.
Okay. And were they devout Catholics?
I don't know.
You don't know. Okay.
Yeah. You definitely didn't practice, for sure.
In practice. Okay. So, have you had other relationships where you felt you were crossing racial or cultural bounds, and how did those turn out? What were your experiences?
I mean, every relationship I've been in, we were not of the same race, of the same religion, none of it, and it was never an issue. Everyone was very open. Sorry, the doorbell just went off, but yeah, everything was very open. People learned from one another, you know, that was the beauty of our relationships. We wanted to have mixed kids and you know, visit each other's countries.
For that. Yeah.
Yeah. But that one was just, and he was a mama's boy, so.
Self-identify culturally and racially then. I know you talked about 1/4 Muslim influence. You're not really religious. You do believe in God, so you're a spiritual person. But how do you identify, if you do, because some people don't, but how do you, Soheyla?
I believe in God.
Okay, and what about racially?
I am mixed. I'm Colombian, Brazilian, Armenian, Turkish. So, well, yep.
And what about culturally?
If you really think about it, Armenians and Turks have more of that Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, and then Brazilians and Colombians are more Latin. So it's really half-half, if you put it that way. And I take from both parts.
Your parents must have an interesting love story, like truly.
They definitely do, yeah.
Their backgrounds and the history between Turkey and Armenia. I mean, is the average American aware of the genocide and the, you know, I mean, here in Canada we are. I'm just asking, in your daily life, is this something that's salient?
Yeah, most people who I've said this to, I want to say 8 out of 10 of them know what exactly I'm talking about. I don't even have to mention it. Their eyes kind of grow open.
Like mine, right? Like mine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they ask me a lot of questions from there. But the average person on the street, I wouldn't. They have nothing to say.
I
I
understand.
can tell from their face, but they don't really ask questions unless I know them.
So, Soheyla, what lessons have you learned given the fact that pretty much all your relationships have been, and I'm not saying that you've had a million relationships, but given that you just stated that all your relationships have been intercultural, interracial, what lessons have you learned and that you can share with viewers who may be going through a similar situation, who may self-identify with who you are and what you've been through?
You know, honestly, I don't believe that children are 100% reflection of their parents, but it is good to understand the mindset of the parents and, you know, really get to know them on a personal level in terms of their dating experience, their upbringing, and I'm talking about the parents here, just because it really goes to show whether or not the family is open or not, right? I think that's great. Also, in terms of what lessons did your significant other grow up implementing, right? Obviously, that comes from the parents as well. So I think that has a lot to do with how your relationship is going to be tested. I think that, for instance, I was talking to someone who doesn't have a close relationship with his parents, and they're always bickering just because the parents are very closed off. The parents don't approve or support his lifestyle, right? And if that's the case, then you may want to question whether or not that's something you want to move forward with, especially if you're very family oriented. Because if you don't have that support from all different areas and all different people, it's not going to work out.
I understand. I think those are good words. Very good words. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that? Because we're going to have to wrap this up. And I want to give you the platform now. So here you are. You're talking to us about intercultural and interracial dating and relationships. Soheyla, the platform is yours.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, besides that one experience I had, it was extremely positive. I think that's a New York thing. Everyone here is very multi-dimensional, a lot of different cultures, backgrounds, everywhere you want to get into a full-on relationship with someone and you are mixed or you have differing religions, you need to have that conversation up front, because the last thing you want to do is get too deep emotionally and now all of a sudden you've dug this, hole for yourself that you can't crawl out of. So I think that being very open from the very beginning is very helpful.
I gotta ask you, can you leave us with a humorous anecdote or situation that you think occurred because of the intercultural or interracial difference? What's the funniest thing you can remember having to do with maybe your Brazilian ex?
The funniest thing I can remember, let's see. Yeah, one time I was gonna take him home to meet my mom, and he put on makeup to cover his tattoos, and he took his earrings off, I don't know why she didn't care, but he got that from his mother. So no one told him to do that.
So he wanted to integrate into your family. He wanted to please you. He wanted to please your mom.
Well,
Right?
he was scared. He figured if he had tattoos and he was walking into this home that had Muslim, some portion of it, that his head would probably be blown off, according to his mother. So
Did the makeup match his skin tone?
it did. It was great. Yeah, but because I saw him like that, I actually did not take him home, and we had an argument, so it didn't work out.
And he tried. He really tried there, didn't he?
He was scared. Let's just say that he didn't try for a positive reason.
Looking back, Soheyla, is there anything you would do differently knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I think I would be more open to relationships, because I saw my parents growing up and not really putting in too much effort within the people around them. I didn't put much effort into getting to know someone's mother, and that's really the only example I can think of when it comes to dating. And because of that, it really created a huge drift. It created a cloud of assumptions. And instead of wanting to educate her, I kind of just walked away. So, be open to educating people with grace, have standards with grace, right? And I think it'll work out fine.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you so much, Soheyla, for participating today and sharing your personal experiences with us. And you've given us a very unique insight that I don't think we've experienced yet. With your very unique background. So I want to thank you. I'm Dr. Sam Dubé, and from Queens, New York. Soheyla, stay safe. Thanks again, and let's keep in touch, okay?
Thank you.
All right, you take care. Bye-bye. I know. This is awesome.